The fish looks fresh today.
Morning, dear. Want the usual?
How's your boy doing?
He's been resting. Doctors say it's something unusual.
Retractor, please.
Doctor, look here. That can't be right.
The scan. Look at the scan.
That can't be right. Run it again.
Just a little more, sweetheart. You need your strength.
Mom, am I getting better?
Of course you are. You're stronger than you think.
It all began with whispers. At first, they were quiet, barely floating through the hallways of Lincoln Middle School in Nebraska. But by the end of that week, the entire town was talking. 12-year-old Eli Turner, a shy, bright boy who loved sketching rocket ships, had a belly that kept swelling. At first, his classmates joked about him getting chubby. Then the jokes turned cruel. Someone snickered, "Eli's pregnant." Laughter followed, sharp, echoing, merciless. His mother, Rachel Turner, tried to ignore the noise. She worked 2 jobs and barely had time to rest, let alone deal with childish rumors. But when Eli came home crying one night, holding his stomach in pain, Rachel's heart sank. The next morning, she drove him to the local clinic. The doctor examined him briefly, frowned, and said it was probably just gas. But a week later, his belly was even larger. It looked tight, unnaturally round, as if something inside was pushing from within. Neighbors started whispering too. A woman from across the street muttered that Rachel was hiding something, that Eli's condition was unnatural. Rachel tried to brush it off, but fear began to gnaw at her. She knew her son wasn't pregnant. That idea was absurd. But she also knew something was terribly wrong. And when another night of screaming pain hit, she grabbed her keys and raced Eli to the hospital, tears streaming down her face. Doctors crowded around the boy as monitors beeped and lights flashed. Then one nurse gasped. The scan on the monitor showed something none of them could explain. It wasn't a tumor. It wasn't fluid. It was something else. And when the lead surgeon looked closer at the image, his face turned white. He whispered just one word. Impossible. Before the whispers, before the hospital lights and the fear, there was just a small kitchen filled with morning sunlight. Rachel Turner stood by the stove, flipping pancakes as her son Eli sat at the wooden table with his backpack open. He was drawing, always drawing. Spaceships, planets, swirling galaxies. "Someday," he'd say, "I'll build one that can go past Saturn." Rachel would laugh. "Just remember to call your mom when you get there." It was their little ritual, laughter before the day began. They lived in a small town outside Lincoln, Nebraska, in a rented house that creaked when the wind blew. Rachel worked long hours at Baker's Diner, the kind of place where regulars ordered the same coffee every morning and called her darlin'. Life was simple, modest, and full of quiet love. Eli wasn't popular at school, but he didn't mind. He had a few close friends and a teacher, Mrs. Cooper, who adored his curiosity. When other kids played video games, Eli read books about the stars. He once told his mom, "The universe is like a big mystery waiting to be solved." Rachel had always admired that about him. His mind, his kindness, his gentle way of seeing beauty where others didn't. But lately, something had changed. It began with little things. Eli stopped finishing his meals. He said his stomach felt tight, like he'd eaten too much even when he hadn't touched his food. At night, Rachel would hear him shifting in bed, restless, sometimes groaning softly in pain. One evening, she knocked on his door and found him sitting on the floor, hugging his knees. His eyes were red. "Mom," he whispered, "people keep staring at me. They say I look weird." Rachel hugged him tight, stroking his hair. "They don't understand, sweetheart. You're just growing fast." But inside, a small voice whispered, "This isn't normal." Weeks passed. Eli's stomach continued to swell, and even his loose t-shirts couldn't hide it anymore. When Rachel asked the doctor again, he gave her a polite smile and said, "Boys his age can bloat easily. It's probably digestion." But Rachel wasn't convinced. Her gut, that quiet, motherly instinct, told her this was more than a stomach ache. At night, when the diner closed and she finally came home, Rachel would stand in Eli's doorway watching him sleep. His breathing was shallow, his hands clutching his stomach even in dreams. She prayed silently, whispering, "Please, God, whatever this is, don't take my boy." Outside, the Nebraska wind howled through the fields. It was the kind of wind that carried secrets, and Rachel felt deep down that hers was about to be uncovered, because sometimes the universe doesn't wait for you to find the mystery. Sometimes it finds you first. The first real scare came on a Sunday morning. Rachel was folding laundry when she heard a crash from Eli's room. She ran in and found him on the floor, gasping, clutching his stomach. His face was ghostly white and sweat drenched his hair. "Eli." "Baby, what's wrong?" "It hurts," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It feels like something's moving inside me." Rachel froze. The words didn't make sense, not for a boy his age. But the look on his face, that wasn't imagination. That was pain. She rushed him to the emergency room. Doctors crowded around asking questions, attaching monitors, drawing blood. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too cold. Rachel stood at the foot of the bed, arms wrapped around herself, trying to breathe. An hour later, a young doctor came in with a clipboard and a tired smile. "Good news," he said. "No infection, no blockage. Probably stress." "Stress?" Rachel repeated, stunned. "He's been under pressure lately? Maybe anxiety from school?" She wanted to scream. Anxiety doesn't make a stomach swell. They sent Eli home that night with pain medication and rest instructions. For a few days, things seemed calmer. But then it happened again. This time the pain was worse, sharper, deeper. Eli doubled over in the kitchen, his plate of soup shattering on the floor. Rachel drove like a madwoman to the hospital. Another team of doctors examined him. More scans, more silence, and always the same conclusion. "We're not sure, but it doesn't appear life-threatening." That phrase haunted her. Doesn't appear. At school, the bullying grew crueler. Kids took photos, whispered, and posted jokes online. Eli, the pregnant boy. Rachel begged the principal to intervene, but the damage was done. Even adults started avoiding eye contact at the grocery store. One afternoon, she found Eli sitting by the window, drawing again. But this time, it wasn't rockets or stars. It was a small, dark shape floating inside a circle, like something trapped. When she asked what it was, he said quietly, "I think it's what's inside me." Rachel felt her throat tighten. He wasn't supposed to talk like that. He wasn't supposed to believe something was inside him. But part of her, the deepest, most terrified part, believed it too. Desperate, she took him to a specialist 2 hours away, Dr. Michael Henderson, a pediatric surgeon with decades of experience. He listened carefully, didn't laugh, didn't rush her. After a long pause, he said, "Let's run every test we can. We'll find out what this is." The scans came back the next day. Rachel sat in a chair beside Eli, clutching his hand as the doctor flipped through the images. His brow furrowed. He went back, zoomed in, then again. "Mrs. Turner," he said slowly, "I need to show you something." On the monitor was a shadow, dense, irregular, about the size of a grapefruit. It wasn't fluid. It wasn't gas. It looked structured. "What is it?" Rachel asked. Dr. Henderson hesitated. "We don't know yet. It's not typical of any growth or tumor I've seen." Her heart dropped. "You mean it's cancer?" He shook his head. "I'm not saying that. But it's unusual. We'll need to refer Eli to a larger hospital." That night, Rachel didn't sleep. She sat on the floor beside her son's bed, listening to his uneven breathing. She thought about the doctor's face, the flicker of fear in his eyes before he looked away. The next morning, she packed their bags. Lincoln General Hospital was 3 hours away, but she didn't care, as long as someone, somewhere, could tell her what was happening. During the drive, Eli slept against the window, pale and fragile. Rachel kept one hand on the wheel and the other on his knee, whispering, "Hang on, baby. We'll find out soon." When they arrived, the hospital loomed huge and sterile under gray skies. Inside, doctors swarmed again. New faces, new tests, new theories. One mentioned fluid accumulation. Another said abnormal tissue growth. A third muttered embryonic residue, and was quickly shushed by his superior. Rachel caught the look between them. It was the same silent exchange she'd seen before, confusion mixed with dread. She realized then that whatever was inside her son wasn't something they could easily explain, and when one nurse accidentally left the scan photo on the counter, Rachel saw it clearly for the first time. A shape. Curved. Almost human. Her knees went weak. The days that followed were a blur of white walls and whispered conversations. Doctors came and went like shadows, carrying tablets and x-rays they didn't want Rachel to see. Every time she asked for an update, she got the same answer. We're still running tests. Eli's stomach kept growing. Not in a natural way. It stretched tight, as though something beneath the skin was pushing outward. He could barely sit up now. Every few minutes he'd wince and press his hands against his abdomen, whispering that he could feel movement. Rachel's nerves were shredded. She'd lost count of the sleepless nights, of the times she prayed silently in hospital bathrooms where no one could hear her cry. On the fourth night, Dr. Henderson arrived unexpectedly. His expression was grim. "Mrs. Turner," he began carefully, "we have new imaging results. I need you to see them." He led her into a darkened viewing room. On the screen, a series of MRI scans flickered. Black, white, gray. But there was something different this time. Within the mass inside Eli's abdomen, there were patterns, lines, segments, like bones. Rachel's stomach turned cold. "That looks like a spine," she whispered. Dr. Henderson didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "It has features that resemble vertebrae, yes. But that's impossible." He rubbed his eyes, exhausted. "I've sent the scans to multiple specialists. None of them can explain it. Some think it's a highly calcified tumor. Others don't have a theory at all." She stared at the monitor, unable to breathe. And then she saw it, just for a moment, the faintest flicker of movement inside the shadow. "Something twitched. Did you see that?" she gasped. Dr. Henderson replayed the scan. The movement was gone. "Artifacts," he muttered. "Sometimes the machine produces visual noise." But his voice trembled. That night, Rachel stayed by Eli's bedside again. The hospital lights buzzed softly, monitors beeped rhythmically. At 2 a.m., she dozed off until a sound woke her. A faint, rhythmic thumping. It wasn't the heart monitor. It came from Eli's stomach. She leaned closer. Thump, thump, thump. For a few seconds, it was unmistakable. A heartbeat where no heartbeat should exist. She screamed for the nurse. Within minutes, the room flooded with staff. Eli was semi-conscious, moaning in pain. The monitors went wild. The heartbeat sound faded, then returned stronger, faster. Dr. Henderson arrived, pulling on gloves. "Get an ultrasound now!" They wheeled in the machine. The technician's hands trembled as she ran the probe across Eli's swollen abdomen. The image appeared on screen. Rachel's heart nearly stopped. There, inside the boy's body, was a shape curled in a fetal position. Arms, legs, a faint beating heart. The room fell silent. The nurse dropped her pen. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Rachel backed away, her mind spinning. That's not possible," she whispered. Dr. Henderson said nothing. His face had gone completely white. He turned to the nurse. "Record everything. And prepare an OR. We're operating now." They tried to reassure Rachel, but their voices sounded distant, hollow. She signed the consent form with shaking hands. Before they wheeled Eli away, he opened his eyes weakly. "Mom," he murmured. "If it hurts, don't cry, okay?" She pressed his hand to her face. "I won't, baby. I promise." But the moment the doors closed, she broke down completely. In the observation gallery, Rachel sat frozen while the surgical team prepped below. Bright lights illuminated the small, fragile body on the table. Machines hummed. Instruments gleamed. Dr. Henderson stood at the head of the table, breathing deeply through his mask. He whispered, "Let's find out what's inside you, son." The first incision was small, deliberate. Then a collective gasp. The tissue beneath the skin was unlike anything they had ever seen. Fibrous, luminous, almost alive. The heart monitor beeped faster. Eli's body jerked once, then fell still. The anesthesiologist shouted something. But before anyone could react, the entire surgical field pulsed. Rachel could see it from behind the glass. The movement under her son's skin. Like something pushing back from the inside. Dr. Henderson's voice was tight. Scalpel, suction, keep pressure steady. But whatever they had touched, it responded. The monitors spiked. An eerie, rhythmic sound filled the room. That same impossible heartbeat, now echoing through the speakers. And then, as the last layer was opened, the lights flickered across the room, and everyone froze. What they saw inside would be impossible to forget. The room fell into stunned silence. For a moment, no one moved. The air itself felt heavy, as if the entire world had stopped breathing. Dr. Henderson leaned closer, his gloved hands trembling slightly. Under the bright surgical lights, what they had uncovered glistened. Not blood, not tissue, but a translucent membrane, pulsing faintly with light. "What is that?" one nurse whispered. He didn't answer. He was too focused. He made another careful incision along the membrane's edge. It opened with a faint hiss, and a rush of warm air escaped, fogging his face shield. Inside was something that looked formed, small, curved, fragile. Rachel pressed her hands against the glass, her breath catching in her throat. She could see it clearly now. It wasn't a tumor. It wasn't an infection. It was a mass of human-like tissue. Tiny bones, faint traces of hair, even fingernails no larger than grains of rice. For a second, the shape inside twitched, as though reacting to the light. A young nurse turned away, whispering a prayer under her breath. Dr. Henderson froze, staring, his voice shaking. "This isn't possible. This isn't any known medical condition." He turned to the assistant. "Get pathology in here now." But deep down, he already knew what he was seeing. He'd read about it once, a phenomenon so rare it bordered on myth. A fetus in fetu, a parasitic twin that begins to develop inside its sibling before birth. Except Eli was 12. This shouldn't exist anymore. It shouldn't be alive. Rachel's mind reeled as she watched the doctors work. She could hear fragments of their conversation through the intercom. Connected to the aorta, still drawing blood flow. "We can't remove it safely." Her son was lying there, unconscious, his small chest rising and falling. And inside him, something had been growing, feeding, living. Tears blurred her vision. All those nights of pain, the swelling, the strange heartbeat. It all made sense now, in the most horrifying way possible. Down in the operating room, Dr. Henderson made the hardest call of his career. "We can't let it keep feeding. It's killing him." He steadied his breath, nodded to the anesthesiologist, and began carefully detaching the mass. The monitors screamed in protest, Eli's vitals dropping, rising, dropping again. "Keep his pressure steady," Henderson barked. Every move was a gamble. One wrong cut, and Eli could bleed out in seconds. The team worked in absolute silence, except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, Henderson lifted the mass from the cavity, a small, twisted bundle, warm and faintly glowing under the lights. For one horrifying instant, Rachel thought she saw a twitch, like a reflex, or maybe just a trick of light. Then it went still. "Clamp the arteries," Henderson ordered softly. He handed the mass to the pathology nurse, who placed it gently in a containment tray. Everyone in the room exhaled at once. Henderson leaned over Eli again. "Close him up, slowly." Rachel sank into her chair, sobbing in relief and grief all at once. Her child was alive, but the image of what she'd seen would haunt her forever. After the surgery, hours passed before Henderson emerged from the OR. His scrubs were soaked with sweat. He pulled down his mask, his face pale. "Mrs. Turner," he said quietly, "he's stable. We removed the growth. He's going to need time to recover." Rachel covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Henderson nodded but didn't smile. He hesitated, then added, "What we found, It was unlike anything I've ever encountered. It had vascular connection and tissue organization resembling an early human embryo. But it was still metabolically active. She stared blankly. Are you saying it was alive? He looked down. It was, yes. For a time, the words hit her like a wave. For a long time, she couldn't speak. Later that night, after Eli was transferred to intensive care, Rachel stood outside his room watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. Machines beeped softly beside him, but his face looked calm, almost angelic. Dr. Henderson joined her quietly. I don't want you to blame yourself, he said. You couldn't have known. This is one in tens of millions. Rachel nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on her son. I don't blame anyone, she whispered. I just want him to wake up, to have a chance at a normal life. The doctor hesitated, then said something she would never forget. You know, Mrs. Turner, sometimes medicine gives us answers we wish we never found. Rachel didn't reply. She just kept watching Eli, the boy who had carried life and death inside him, and somehow survived both. The first sound Rachel heard when she opened her eyes the next morning was the steady beeping of a heart monitor. For a second, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw him, Eli, lying in the hospital bed, pale but breathing. His chest rose and fell softly. His face, once twisted in pain, looked peaceful again. Tears streamed down her cheeks before she even realized she was crying. She reached for his hand. It was warm. Hey, baby, she whispered, her voice trembling. You made it? A nurse entered quietly, checking the monitors. He's doing well, she said with a gentle smile. The surgery was a success. His vitals are strong. You can talk to him when he wakes. Rachel nodded, her throat too tight for words. She looked at the boy she'd almost lost, the boy who'd carried something impossible inside him, and whispered a silent thank you to whatever force had kept him alive. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher outside the window, casting golden light across the sheets. Then Eli stirred. His eyes fluttered open, confused at first. Mom? Rachel gasped, clutching his hand. I'm here. I'm right here. He blinked slowly, voice weak. Did they get it out? She hesitated, then nodded.
Yes, sweetheart.
It's gone. You're safe now. He exhaled softly, relief washing over his face. Later, Dr. Henderson came by, clipboard in hand, his tone calm but serious. He's recovering faster than expected, he said, but we'll need to monitor him for internal healing and potential complications. His body's been through a lot. Rachel nodded. Whatever it takes, I'll be here every day. Over the next week, Eli grew stronger. He could sit up, laugh a little, even draw again. This time his drawings were different. No strange shapes, no dark figures. Just rockets, stars, and a bright blue sky. But the outside world had already caught wind of the story. Somehow news leaked from the hospital staff. Within days, reporters swarmed the entrance, calling it the boy who was pregnant. The phrase spread like wildfire across social media. Rachel's phone buzzed endlessly. Journalists, strangers, even conspiracy theorists demanding to know the truth. She turned them all away. She refused to let her son become a headline. Still, the whispers reached Eli. He scrolled through his phone one morning and saw his own face on the news. He turned to his mother, eyes wide and wet. They think I'm a freak. Rachel's heart shattered. She sat beside him and held his hand tightly. Listen to me, she said softly. You're not a freak. You're a miracle. You survived something no one could even imagine. You're here. That's what matters. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then quietly he said, It felt alive, Mom, inside me, like it wanted to stay. Rachel swallowed hard, blinking back tears. I know, she whispered. But it's over now. You don't have to carry it anymore. That night, Rachel stood outside on the hospital terrace. The city lights shimmered below, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Dr. Henderson joined her, his coat draped loosely over his shoulders. You handled all of this with incredible strength, he said. Rachel gave a tired smile. I didn't have a choice. When you're a mother, you just keep going, he nodded. You know, I've operated on hundreds of children. But I've never seen anything like this. Science might explain it one day. Or maybe it won't. She looked at him, eyes soft but firm. I don't need science to explain it, she said. All I know is my son's alive. That's enough. When Eli was finally discharged, nurses lined the hallway to wave goodbye. He walked slowly, supported by his mother, his small hand wrapped around hers. Every few steps, he smiled shyly, as if rediscovering the world. Outside, the sunlight felt warmer than she remembered. Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, letting the light hit her face. For the first time in months, she didn't feel fear. She felt hope. As they reached the parking lot, Eli tugged her sleeve. Mom? Yes, honey? He looked up at her, serious. Do you think it was trying to be my brother? Rachel froze. Her lips parted, but no words came. Then she knelt, cupping his face gently in her hands. I don't know, she said softly. But maybe it just wanted you to live. Maybe it gave you its life so you could keep yours. Eli thought about that for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'm glad it did. Rachel hugged him tightly, tears of gratitude and sorrow blending together. In that moment, she realized the story wasn't about horror. It was about survival, and the love that makes survival possible. 2 months passed. The hospital visits became less frequent. The nightmares faded, slowly but surely. Rachel and Eli moved to a small house on the edge of town, surrounded by open fields and trees that swayed softly in the wind. The world outside still whispered about the boy who carried life inside him. But here it felt far away, peaceful. Every morning, Rachel made pancakes shaped like stars, Eli's favorite. He'd sit by the kitchen window, sketchbook open, drawing rockets and planets again. But now his drawings had something new. Small, glowing orbs drifting beside the rockets. Those are souls, he said once. They help the rockets find their way. Rachel smiled through her tears. He was healing, and so was she. One afternoon, Dr. Henderson drove down from the city to visit them. He looked healthier, lighter somehow. Eli ran out to greet him, waving excitedly. Hey, Doc, I can run again. That's incredible, Eli, Henderson laughed. You're stronger than most kids I know. Inside, over coffee, the doctor spoke quietly to Rachel. I wanted to tell you, the samples we collected. The lab results were inconclusive. Some tissue resembled human structure, but there were anomalies we can't classify. Genetic tests were conflicting. Rachel nodded slowly. She had expected that. It's okay, she said softly. You don't have to explain it. Some things aren't meant to be understood. The doctor looked at her, thoughtful. You know, I used to think medicine could explain everything, he admitted. Now I'm not so sure. Sometimes I wonder if what we call science is just the language we use to describe miracles we don't yet understand. Rachel smiled faintly. Maybe that's the truth. As evening fell, the doctor left, and Rachel stood on the porch watching the sunset. Eli was chasing fireflies in the field, his laughter carrying through the warm air. The light flickered around him like stars reborn. She thought of everything they'd endured, the fear, the confusion, the impossible discovery. And she realized that for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore, because the unknown had already lived inside her son, and he had survived it. Weeks later, Eli returned to school. The stares were still there at first, whispers behind his back, a few cruel jokes, but something about him had changed. He didn't shrink away anymore. He smiled, lifted his chin, and kept walking. When a classmate asked him if the stories were true, he simply said, Yeah, but it's not what you think. It's just something that happened. And I'm still me. That confidence, that quiet strength, it silenced most of them. By the end of the week, he had new friends. Real ones. At night, Rachel sometimes watched him sleep, the moonlight falling across his face. There was a faint scar across his abdomen, a reminder of everything they'd been through. But to her, it wasn't a scar. It was proof of life. Months turned into a year. Eli grew taller, stronger, happier. The doctors eventually stopped calling. The reporters found new stories. But one memory never left Rachel, that sound in the operating room. That second heartbeat. Sometimes, when the house was quiet and the night still, she swore she could hear it again, faint, distant, like an echo of something sacred. Not haunting, but comforting, as if whatever had once lived inside her son was still watching over them, quietly, gently. And she realized something. Life isn't measured by what science can explain. It's measured by what love can survive, because love, pure, unbreakable love, had carried them through the unthinkable. They said her son was pregnant. They said it was impossible, unnatural, something to fear. But what they didn't see was the love that never gave up, even when science failed. Some mysteries aren't meant to terrify us. They're meant to remind us how fragile and miraculous life truly is. Because sometimes, miracles are born from tragedy.